Good day. I'm Dr. Mark Andrew Holachek, Ukrainian philosopher and scholar, early American philosopher and scholar. Um, and today I want to welcome you to the 11th episode of I in Ukraine. I want to talk about Donald Trump's recent insistence that it is Zelensky in Ukraine that doesn't want the war to end. He's been saying that for several weeks at this point that Putin's willing to come to the table, or so it seems. It's Zelensky that's holding things up. And in some sense, he's right. Zelensky has been arguing, reasonably so, for a lasting and just peace, and that would entail security guarantees. What does it mean by security guarantees? Well, according to Article 5, right, of the UN, of the NATO agreement, an attack on one nation is an attack on all. Now, Ukraine's not a member of NATO. It's been striving to be a member of NATO. It would love to have NATO membership, but it doesn't. But it does have European backing, even if it doesn't have US backing right now. And Trump has been amaranthine evasive about the possibility of any sorts of security guarantees. He's been interested in Ukraine's trillions of dollars of worth of rare minerals. And ever since that came to his attention, his eyes just bulged. Boy, if I could get my hands on that, that would make all the difference in the world. So the war for him is just about making a deal. When he makes a deal, as he says in his book, The Art of the Deal, he aims high and he keeps pushing and pushing and pushing till he gets what he wants. There are winners and losers in life. There's one winner. Everybody else is a loser. We'll talk about that in a little bit. That's sort of a sad way to look at life and a sad way to live your life. He's a sad sort of person as far as I'm concerned. On March 7, yesterday, 2025, he does finally at least address the issue of security guarantees. And he says, before I even think about that, I want to settle the war, get it finished. As far as the question about security later, that's the easy part. The hard part is getting it settled. Now, settling the war. Trump doesn't have a clue, as far as I'm concerned, of what it means to settle the war. Do we have a quick ceasefire? Most experts say the first part is to agree to ceasefire, some sort of terms. And once the ceasefire goes in, then there's a long, hard process of negotiation for a lasting and just peace. The difficulty here is Zelensky wants security guarantees so that if he does agree to a ceasefire, that in accordance with the Minsk agreement, for example, in 2014, 2015, when Ukraine agreed to a ceasefire in exchange of prisoners with Russia, Putin violated those terms immediately, never paid any attention to them. So Zelensky, very rightfully so, wants to say to Trump, what are you going to give me in advance? Trump has been eager to say, I'm fine with Russia having the lands that it currently occupies. I'm fine with Russia's demand that the United States should not join NATO ever. What is Ukraine going to get? Ukraine's not even getting a guarantee that if Russia decides to attack again once there is peace, the United States will come to its defense. Trump won't get you that. He says, well, we'll talk about security after the war is over. Now, how silly is this? Talk about putting the cart before the horse. The idea is for Zelensky, there can't be any end of the war unless there's security guarantees. That's sensible for him. Ukraine has been suffering throughout the war, and Trump is just indifferent to that. This is a person who doesn't care about human suffering. I'll talk about that later, and especially on a subsequent episode. All right, so the hard part is getting it settled, whatever settling means. He doesn't have any idea of the long history between Russia and Ukraine and the difficulties in settling a war because of the hostilities that have been going on at least to the mid-17th century. Right? Without any understanding of that, there's not going to be any a settlement. This whole notion of getting a quick settlement, he's always interested in a quick settlement, perhaps because he wants this Nobel Peace Prize. If anybody is less deserving of a Nobel Peace Prize, it's this demented, autocratic narcissist, Donald Trump. All right. Then he says, once the U.S. pulls out its military aid for Ukraine, number one. Then it also pulls out its intelligence, any sort of intelligence that Ukraine might have supplied to, that the United States might have supplied to Ukraine is gone. He's not going to do that anymore. Now, this again suspiciously sounds just like caving into Russia. Why are we giving Russia everything it wants? This has been our perennial enemy, and now we are friends. Recall the vote in the UN toward the end of February that the United States is not going to vote with all the other sober-sided nations and condemn Russia for starting the war. According to Putin, it's Ukraine who started the war, right? He said, well, after the U.S. pulled away its intelligence operations and aid to Ukraine, we're suspending aid to Ukraine, all the money, and he says it's 350 billion when it's literally only 120 billion. Much of that money is really not given to Ukraine because it's pledged to Ukraine, and Ukraine gives it right back to the U.S. to buy weapons from the United States. So it's not like the European Union has spent something like 130 billion, the United States like 120 billion, and United States is getting a lot of that money back. Trump never mentions that at all. So it's not like we're spending all that much money for Ukraine security because the money we give them comes back to American businesses. All right. So with the suspension of military assistance and intelligence to Ukraine, Russia went on the offensive and did a lot of bombing in Ukraine. And Trump responds to that. Well, Putin is just doing what any reasonable person would do, right? If there's a suspension of assistance, why not go ahead and escalate? That's just reasonable. Now, anyone else, he says, right? I asked the question, would anyone else have gone into Ukraine in the first place? And the answer is no. I mentioned this suspicious phone call between Trump and Putin on February 12th, the content of which nobody knows. But what we do know is thereafter, Trump has made a 180, and his allegiance has been to Russian Putin, not to NATO and his European friends, not to Canada, not to Mexico, and all the other nations with whom we've been trading, and the other democratic nations have been good to us throughout the decades. Now, Trump has a history with Putin. That much we know. He tries to keep his past quiet, but there have been several leaks. Now, Bob Woodward has a new book that he has just published, and he mentions that Trump and Putin have shared at least 7 phone conversations from 2020 to 2024, prior to the presidency of 2020. What's the content? There's no question, it seems to me, that these have been in discussion of Trump's bid for another presidential election and how could Putin help him. Putin has something on Donald Trump. If we could find out what these conversations were like, that would be very, very helpful. I'm sure if we knew about what was going on in these conversations, Trump would be thrown out of the office. Maybe not, because the radical Republicans in the Congress and the Trump ditto heads love the person no matter what he does. I remember Trump having said, I could shoot someone in cold blood on the street and people would still vote for me. That's a wonderful thing to say, but it shows the lack of intelligence and the intelligence level of many of the people who avidly support Donald Trump. He can do whatever he wants and we won't care. Now, CNN reporters in some of the research I did show that between 2013 and 2017, Trump has mentioned Putin 80 times, right, in talks, interviews, and in tweets and so forth. And I thought it'd be interesting to go and look at some of these, right? Did Trump and Putin ever meet? That's the first question. And I mentioned that Trump, I think it was in 2014, held a Miss Universe, whatever it was, beauty pageant in Moscow. He had the opportunity to meet with with Putin, and presumably the two did meet, and we have evidence of this. October 17, 2014, Trump tells Larry King that he met Putin once. A month later, he says, I do have a relationship with him, i.e., Putin, and he speaks warmly about Putin, uh, congenially, has nothing bad to say about him. March 18, 2015, the following year, says Putin sent him two gifts. I quote, an award and a beautiful letter. And then he adds that the relationship with him is great. He adds, if I should become president, I'd get along great with him. In other words, Putin really is fond of Putin, right? In 2016, when Trump is running for the presidency, he denies any knowledge of who Putin is or ever having met him. July 27, 2016. I have nothing to do with Russia, nothing to do. I never met Putin. I have nothing to do with Russia whatsoever. Later in the day, he says at a news conference, I never met Putin. I don't know who Putin is. He said one nice thing about me. He said, I'm a genius. I said, thank you very much to the newspaper. And that was the end of it. I never met Putin. Now, he is fond of referencing this. Trump is a very thin-skinned person, right? He's no pachyderm. And that said, he loves to quote Putin, calling him a genius. And Putin is just playing up to Donald Trump. Trump can't see this, but Trump is inordinately fond of anybody who recognizes his sublime, high intelligence and so forth, which he doesn't possess, but he thinks he possesses. All right. 2016, February 17th. I have no relationship with him other than he called me a genius. He said, Donald Trump is a genius and he's going to be the leader of the party and he's going to be the leader of the world or something, with his usual clarity. March 12th, same year. Putin said good things about me. He said he's a leader and there's no question about it. He's a genius. June 3, same year. Then Putin said, Donald Trump is a genius. He's going to be the next great leader of the United States. End quote. Now think of it. They, how about the American people probably, wanted me to disavow what he said. How dare you call me a genius? How dare you call me a genius, Vladimir? Wouldn't it be nice if we actually got along with Russia? Wouldn't that be good? This whole notion of how dare Putin call him a genius in Trump's words. How dare, get up, Jeff, how dare Putin speak the truth is what Trump is trying to say. I know of very few geniuses that go around wearing a T-shirt saying, I'm a genius. Pat me on the back. And if someone follows the way Trump speaks, his sentence structure, and how so forth, we see that he's anything but a genius. All right. And of course, there is reciprocity in Trump being called a genius a number of times by Putin. He turns around and pats Putin on the back. He says to Bill O'Reilly, September 29, 2015, in terms of leadership, he, Putin, is getting an A. He's a great leader. Right? December 18, 2015. Talking about Putin again. He's running his country, and at least he's a leader, unlike what we have in this country, i.e. Obama. There's a lot of stupidity going on in the world right now, a lot of killing going on, a lot of stupidity, redundancy, unclarity. Again, Trump very fond of speaking in vague terms and generalities without ever mentioning specifics, right? With ever minutiae. Doesn't get into that at all. That's just not his MO. He doesn't have a collection of facts to which he can refer when he needs to. His mind doesn't process information. He's not very good at reading. He's not very good at retention. I mean, when he was asked to recite a portion of, was it the Declaration of Independence? I think he said, all this, the writing is, no, it was the U.S. Constitution. He said, this is all hard to read. It's all like a different language. You think about that. Their 5-year-olds can go through and read that and apprehend what the Constitution is saying, but it's just difficult for Donald Trump, who would rather get his information like Peter Sellers in the movie Being There. I watch TV, right? All right. He says to George Stephanopoulos on July 31, 2016, he talks about Putin. When Putin invaded the Crimea, he's in the Donbass and they're still fighting. He's talking about Putin. He says he's not going into Ukraine. Okay, just so you understand, he's not going into Ukraine, all right? You can mark it down. You can put it down. You can take it any way you want. Now, I want to share a certain quote, a response at this point of that quote, and as it comes up on screen, I find it's almost funny. He uh, he writes, Stephanopoulos says, but isn't he there? Didn't he evade the Crimea? And Trump says, okay, well, he's there in a certain way. What the hell is that in a certain way? Well, he's there, but he's not there. Of course, he's there. There meaning Crimea, but I'm not there. So he's using there again, and one can only take this. I'm not in Crimea. He's in Crimea in a certain way, but I'm not there. But then the next sentence says, you have Obama there. So we realize the first there and the second there are not indexically pointing to the same thing. He's in a certain way, he's in Crimea, but I'm not there in the White House. You have Obama in the White House. So what do the second and this have to do with the first? I don't know, but that's Trump speak. That's why his ditto heads, right? His Trumpites love him so much. He doesn't make a lot of sense when he speaks, but that's okay because they understand him in a sort of visceral way. He says, of the world is a mess under Obama with all the strength that you're talking about and all the power of NATO and all of this. Again, generalities floating around in vagueness. We don't know what he's talking about. Tell us, give us some specifics about what the zaniness. In the meantime, way he takes Crimea. Who's going away? He's going away. Putin? It's got to be Putin because of the last sentence. He takes Crimea. Right? I mean, this is typical of Donald Trump. And I leave this for a second. He's there in a certain way, but I'm not there. You have Obama there. And frankly, that whole part of the world is a mess under Obama with all the strength that you're talking about and all the power of NATO and all of this. He's talking about NATO, talking about the strength of Europe, never talks about Russia invading. It's okay. All the while, this is in his first presidency, prior to his first presidency, he's talking about, he's got pro-Russian sentiments. He likes Putin. Putin is a billionaire like Trump. Putin is a powerful person. He is the leader of the largest country in the world, largest country in the history of the world, and he likes Putin. All right, so I mean that I definitely vague and stupid, and Jack Kerouac would have a hard time understanding what Trump was saying. And anyways, so Trump, all you have to do is go on the internet, go onto YouTube, read books. His niece Mary Trump, who's a clinical psychologist, talks about Trump's narcissism and the very psychological problems that he has. He has psychopathy to some degree. We'll go on. I'll talk about this in another episode. Anyways, psychologists have gone on officially studying Donald Trump's speeches and utterances, and all of whom, except for really radically right psychotherapists, will argue that he's unfit to be United States president. John Gartner, for example, who's a psychotherapist, he writes, his hypermanic temperament is where his anger comes to the fore. The 40 tweets in one night, even on holidays. His tweets are always filled with rage, constantly labeling people as losers. He's up at 3 a.m. On a holiday, ranting about how anyone who doesn't idolize him is a loser, right? He is a sadist and a narcissist, right? A malignant narcissist, as many have called him. He breathes rage. You don't see him smiling very often. And when he smiles, oftentimes he's smiling because he's done somebody wrong. He's smiling at the pain that he's caused someone, right? When he's not being flattered, when he's not being adored, when he's not being sanctified, He's not being called a genius. He will, and I follow again, Gartner said, he will destroy and inflict pain on anyone who won't worship him. Right. There is a quote from Dr. Mary Trump, who's his niece and who's a clinical psychologist. She'd come out with her book, Too Much and Never Enough, How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man. She calls her uncle the world's most dangerous man. And I'm in agreement with that. He craves power and adulation, and he has both right now. When he doesn't get what he wants, he gets furiously, right, egregiously enraged, and he takes vengeance. Look at what he did to Zelensky, ambushing him in the White House on February 28th, right? We had J.D. Vance aiding him, and Vance is attacked. Normally, in a little photo shoot like that, it's for the two presidents to interact, the two Democratic presidents, but J.D. Vance interact, and that's never been done before at such an event. And it's inexcusable in some sense. It can only be explained by it being premeditated. Mary Trump says he's the world's most dangerous man. He suffers from narcissistic personality disorder. This is not light narcissism. This is the sort of narcissism that gets in the way of healthy living. This person is president of the United States, right? And we're in a dangerous situation because the fate of Ukraine in large part hinges on placating Trump's massive, overflated, mammoth ego. It's a task that can't be done. Mary Trump adds a quote in her book. She says he lives by my grandfather's principle. In life, there can be only one winner. Everybody else is a loser. Now, let's think about that. There's one winner in life. Everybody else is a loser. We take that literally, and I do think Trump lives by that. If he is the winner, everybody around him is a loser. Those who suck up to him are losers. He respects strength, right? It's a game for him. The sort of resistance that Zelensky gave him in a very dark, visceral sense was for Trump fun. It was a setup. And he says, don't tell us how to feel. Nobody tells us how to feel. I'll talk about that in another episode. Very fascinating. Zelensky said something that really, really got under Trump's skin. I'll talk about this in another episode. It deserves its own episode. What was that? Why did it get under Trump's skin? It goes back to Trump's childhood. I'm convinced. Right? One winner, everybody else is a loser. Well, I'm Trump. I'm the winner. Everybody else is a loser. I go back to Dostoevsky, Fyodor Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground. He's on the Nevsky Bridge. This hero, his underground hero, mentions a time in Dostoevsky's wonderful novel about a demented person. And this underground person said, once I had a friend. He wasn't at first my friend. I did everything I could to make this person my friend. I cajoling, flattery, everything I could. And at some point, this person became my friend. And he was the most loyal friend one could imagine. He would do anything for me. And then the underground person said, but the second he became my friend, I had no use for him anymore. I think this is how it is with Donald Trump, right? He has a history of turning over the people that are close to him. One psychotherapist mentioned that everyone in his cabinet his biographer, I should say, everyone in his cabinet will be replaced at some point. He says just take that as fact. He can't have anybody around for any amount of time, right? In effect, he demands your loyalty, and you prove your loyalty. And if you're too sycophantic, he casts you aside. If you're not sycophantic enough, he casts you aside. He'll just cast you aside anyway. Can't have anybody around him for any length of time. It's a challenge to his authority to some extent. Very strange psychological person this man, Donald Trump, is. What that tells me, it's sort of frightening that if Zelensky sort of caves in and does exactly the sort of things that Trump is asking him to do with the mineral deal, apologize and so forth. In my estimation, I think the relationship will sour completely. Trump will have zero respect for Zelensky thereafter, just like the underground person's friend, right? Um, whom he won over. And after winning him over, hey, no respect for him, no further use for him, and so forth. Um, Sweden's former Prime Minister Carl Bildt said this about the clash between Trump and Zelensky. And I'm very proud of Zelensky for holding his own. Disturbing thing is, of course, that we have two big guys, two big egos, believing that they can, he's talking about not Zelensky, excuse me, talking about Trump and Putin, believing they can maneuver all of the issues on their own. For European ears, this sounds like Munich. It sounds like two big leaders wanting to have peace in our time over a faraway country of which they know little. They are preparing to make a deal over the heads of that particular country. A lot of Europeans know how that particular move ended. He's, of course, talking about World War II. So the problem is that we have a very psychologically unstable narcissist, egotist, whose egoism can't be placated. And when it is, he has no further use for the people that placate him. And it's just every day he wakes up. I'm astonished that every day some new crisis is formed because every day Trump wakes up in a state of boredom, I suppose. He's got to have some new activity that occupies his mind, that titillates him, um, motivates him to get up in the morning and do something even zanier. That's the chaotic world. That's the tohu bohu in which we're destined to live so long as Donald Trump remains president. The only way out of this is to rid him, get him thrown out of the presidency. That's an uphill battle because of the majority in the judiciary as well as in the Congress of Republicans who have not shown a propensity to want to rid um, who want to rid the executive powers. He wants to get rid of Donald Trump as the executive of the United States, I should say. So it might be that I don't see him lasting. I predicted that some major catastrophe will be had by the end of February, and I think we've had a number of catastrophes. The greatest of which was the uh, Oval Office ambush, and there will be more catastrophes. I don't see Trump lasting. He will be impeached, whether he lasts, whether the Congress will vote him out of office. It may be till we have midterm elections and get a Democratic majority. We can get rid of the guy. But he's a danger not only to the United States, he's a danger to global security. I want to thank you very much for listening along. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like this. More importantly, if you think there's anything of substance uttered in this Eye on Ukraine episode number 11, please share it with other people, especially Ukrainians. And let's have discussion on this. You don't have to agree with everything I say. The greatness of a democratic nation is that it encourages open discussion. The Jeffersonian Republic, I speak so much and I've written so much on Jefferson. We need to have open discussion, agreement on things, disagreement on things, collisions of ideas so that we can come to a greater understanding of the problems that we face as a nation, as a global community of nations. So let's have discussion. Please make comments under this video if you agree or disagree, and encourage other people to comment so that we can have a discussion and interact with your congressperson so that we can have, if we think they need to be thrown out or voted out, we need to do that. If they need to be thanked, we need to thank them. TTFN, we'll do this on another occasion. Thank you very much.